Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Monstrous Lovers. Last time we arrived in town as a new social worker or something. Is that our job? And now we ran into a few monsters on the street, and we got invited back to one of them's house. So let's try not to commit a hate crime while we're here. Been a while since you were here. Yeah. Anyway, let's begin. As it turns out, Ben's house is right in front of the one marked on Vincent's map. From the living room, I can even see Vincent's house through the window. The sound of Ben closing the door snaps me back to attention. What was I doing for his voice again? How do you feel about chicken? I shrug. Honestly, under these circumstances, I don't feel strongly either way. He gestures at me to take a seat as he makes his way to what I presume is the kitchen. I pick the closest place, the couch, and sit down. You're dating now? Oh my god. Hope he's a hottie. Anyway. Ben, where were you? We're starving. Sorry, I got holed up. Shouldn't it be held up? Held up by Donna. Go get the tableware, please. That sounds like Ben and someone else. Maybe one of his other sisters? Because Ben's house is so small and quiet, I can hear them pretty well, despite not being in the same room. I try to distract myself with something else so I don't end up eavesdropping, but there really isn't much else to focus on. By the way, I invited a friend over for breakfast. Be nice to him. A couple of minutes later, Ben emerges from the hall, this time holding a large bowl. A little girl comes into the living room right after him, carrying a bunch of empty plates on one hand and some cutlery in the other. She's a were-creature just like Ben, but except for her head, where it's long enough to be arranged in a ponytail, her fur is much shorter. It's quite cute, actually. Show it to me. Sylvia, this is Christopher. Christopher, this is my sister Sylvia. Oh, okay. Sylvia takes a step towards me. She has a pretty intense expression of suspicion on her face. Way more intense than a little girl should be capable of. Her nose wrinkles, and I realize that the face she's making is because she's not only looking at me, she's sniffing me. Ah. You smell weird. What kind of monster are you? Well, at least she looks cute. Does she, though? Ben's eyes go wide as he quickly opens and closes his mouth a few times, obviously trying to think of something to say. I thought I was the one who was going to accidentally commit a hate crime, but they're hate criming me. He hurries to put the bowl on the table with his hands now free, takes the things that Sylvia's carrying. Sylvia, why don't you go tell the others that breakfast is ready? They were really hungry, right? Is were-creature the right term? It sounds a little off. Hey, it's the right term, honey. Raising an eyebrow and looking not quite convinced by the change of subject, she turns around and leaves. I'm so sorry about that. Humans have a very distinctive smell, and it's the first time she's met one. You just said where person? Don't worry, I understand. Breakfast ends up being far more hectic than I could have imagined. Ben has 6 younger sisters, of which 5 end up joining us for breakfast. Right in the living room. We barely fit there, and both Ben and I have to eat standing up so they can take a seat. Despite my protests, once we're done, Ben doesn't let me leave until I agree to take some of the leftovers with me. He even offers to help me carry food to Vincent's, but to my luck, as I try to convince him that it isn't necessary, his youngest sister spills a drink on herself, and he stays behind to help her get changed. Not her being sassy as Lizzie? Thank God, neighbors or not, I wouldn't want Vincent to come home and find that the first thing I did was letting someone I barely know into the house. After the whole ordeal with Ben and his sisters, I end up even more exhausted than before and I barely make it to the house. As soon as I step into the living room, I leave the leftovers on the table and pretty much collapse on the couch right afterwards. I manage to raise my head just enough to look around me. All the doors look exactly the same, and there's no way to tell which room they lead to without opening them. Girl, just open the doors. You live here now. Even though Vincent told me to go ahead and make myself at home, I can't help but feel like I'd be intruding if I just began looking for the spare room without him here. What? As I keep debating whether to wait for him, I feel my eyelids get heavier and heavier. Is he calling you out for your BO? Oh, maybe. Sleeping humans are so cute. I almost feel bad for having to interrupt your sleep. But my neck hurts just from looking at you. Come on, darling, time to wake up. The first thing I see when I open my eyes is Vincent kneeling in front of me, resting his arms on the empty space on the couch. Personal space, Vincent. Why are we so allergic to dick? I sit up and push myself to the side, letting out a laugh. Vincent gets up as well and takes a seat next to me. I'm no expert, but I think the guest room's bed is a little more comfortable than the couch. Yeah, well, I have nothing to say to that, so I changed the subject. Wait, I fell asleep? What time is it? Almost 4. God, I must have been more tired than I realized if I lost the better part of the sleeping day. I make a mental note to buy an alarm clock when I come back from work. The good thing is that our shift begins at 7, so there's still about 3 hours left before we have to head there. I should leave early, find something to do in the meantime. Like, with Vincent? There's no point in going to the office so early. Sebastian never really got around to officially putting me into any position, and since he just told me to report to him at 7, I'm pretty sure we'll just end up going over paperwork together. Again. Huh? He's kinda cute? Yes, my little Vincent is cute. We still in the closet? Damn, yeah, I know. I think we're still in the closet. It's a little bit of a headache. There's still a chance that Isaac will be there already, but I'm not familiar enough with the warehouse procedures to be of any help, and I'm not sure how well he could explain them to me. Neither option sounds particularly appealing, but it's not like I can assign work to myself. Instead, I decided to do something else in the meantime. You can find someone to do in the meantime? Exactly. Let's see. I take a look at the leftovers from this morning, still in the same spot that I left them, and I get an idea. Vincent, how busy are you right now? For you, love? Not at all. I ran into one of your neighbors, the werewolf, on the way here. He was pretty insistent about giving me some leftovers to take home, so he lent me a plate. I was hoping to return it before heading to the office. I knew I recognized this smell. Ben's a really nice guy. I'm glad the two of you had a chance to talk. Of course I'll go with you. Perfect. This way I can return the plate to Ben and keep an eye on Vincent to make sure that he arrives on time. Why do we need to make it our personal mission to make sure Vincent arrives on time? Thanks, Vincent. While I go get changed, Vincent does me a favor of putting the leftovers in one of his own dishes and giving a quick rinse to the one Ben lent me. After we're both ready, we head to Ben's house. When Ben opens the door, he's wearing an apron and a pair of yellow rubber gloves. There's a strong disinfectant smell coming from the inside of the house, too. It looks like he was in the middle of cleaning. He urges us inside, and as we take a seat, Vincent and I exchange a look. The smell is stronger, almost pungent in the living room. You know, I can't help but wonder how much we're missing out on these Spanish voices. How is Ben not bothered by it? Can I get you anything? No, we just stopped by to bring you your plate. Why are you blushing? What? What the hell? I thought I told you not to worry about it. He wiggles his finger at me in a half-hearted scold before taking the plate. You know, I do plenty of cooking for my sisters. If you bring me the ingredients, I can make something for you too. It would be cheaper than eating out, and you'd only have to clean up Vincent's fridge. Well, what's wrong with it? For one, it kinda looks like you tried to summon a demon in there. Huh, maybe you should come over more often and make sure I clean it then. Are they flirting in front of me? What? Why are they flirting in front of me? Hello? Vincent? Stop flirting with the other people in front of me. Shaking his head, Ben dismisses Vincent's comment with a laugh. I suppose they get along so well because he's able to take Vincent in stride. So, what do you say? I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to impose. I insist. It's really no trouble at all. After yesterday, I'm beginning to realize that my stay here will go much more smoothly if I just humor him when it comes to small stuff like this. In that case, I'd really appreciate it. If you give me all the things before you go to work, you can come pick up the food after you're done. How was your first day, by the way? Confused, I look at Ben. Even if he saw me at the office, he had no way of knowing that yesterday was my first day at work, and I'm pretty sure I didn't tell him. I turn to Vincent, as if anticipating what I'm about to say. He shakes his head. Don't look at me like that, it wasn't me. Ben clears his throat to get my attention. I actually heard it from the pharmacist. She said that she had seen a human that she didn't recognize at the Department of Integration. I figured she was talking about you, since you're the first human to move to St. George in a while. That's probably what all those stares from yesterday were about. Fine, I guess. I had a lot to do, but it wasn't that different from what I'm used to. He's being too nice about it. Sebastian was an a-hole, even more than usual. There was a misunderstanding. We sorted it out and everything's fine now. Not Ben trying to steal my man. Speaking of which, we'd better get going. I promised him that I would arrive on time. You did, huh? I guess that means I won't be coming in late from now on. See you later, Ben. Thanks again, Ben. Vincent stands up first, waving at Ben as he exits the house. When I'm about to do the same, Ben puts a hand on my shoulder to stop me. Uh-oh. It's nice to see Vincent hang out with someone responsible for a change. Be patient with him, okay? He smiles, and his expression tells me that he's not actually expecting an answer. After he lets go of me, I excuse myself and go catch up with Vincent. The walk to the office is pretty uneventful, and I mostly concentrate on making sure that I've got the way memorized. Once we get there, we find that the front door is still locked, which means that we're the first ones to arrive. Vincent rubs his hands together, grinning so widely that his fangs show. Look at this, Sebastian hasn't arrived yet. I can't wait to see the look on his face when he realizes that I got here before him. Didn't we leave at like 4, even though our shift starts at 7? I mean, we couldn't have spent 3 hours at Ben's. Are we here that early? When Sebastian told me to make sure that Vincent wouldn't be late anymore, I'm pretty sure he didn't expect it to end with Vincent being motivated by the idea of being able to gloat about it. Whatever works, I guess. Just a misunderstanding. I thought I had a job and he disagreed. Yeah. I take the key out of my pocket and open the door. Since we need to wait for Sebastian anyway, Vincent and I head towards the break room. Expecting the break room to be empty, I do a double take when I see Isaac sitting at one of the tables. Though he's facing the front door, he doesn't seem to notice our entrance. Rather, he appears to be staring right through us, completely immobile. Seeing him like this, I understand why many people find androids off-putting. How is he here? The door was locked from the outside. Give me a second. Ignoring my question, Vincent approaches Isaac. Once he's close enough, he leans forward and waves a hand in front of his face. Huh. He's probably recharging. He snaps his finger a couple of times and Isaac's head jerks up with a loud click as his eyes go from dim light to fully illuminated. Getting up at 4? Well, it's 4 p.m. Good evening. My apologies. I miscalculated the amount of time I would have before the room would be needed. Isaac, what are you doing here? Recharging. No, I mean, employees aren't supposed to stay here overnight, alone. He turns towards Vincent and raises an eyebrow. Is he not informed about my situation? I haven't had the chance to tell him. Now's as good a time as any, I suppose. We were interrupted by the sounds of steps, and the three of us go quiet. A moment later, Sebastian comes through the door. PM, that's a whole different kind of oof. Oh wait, right, yeah, that's right, British. It's Tuesday, innit? I'll be damned, you both are here. I suppose congratulations are in order, Wells. He sounds surprised, but pleased nevertheless. Something about his tone tells me that he didn't have that much faith in me. Anyway, I don't have time to think about it. As soon as Sebastian looks at Vincent and Isaac, his whole body tenses up. He points at Isaac. Who's this? Isaac? Who? The android in charge of the warehouse? But we don't have... Sebastian pauses as realization seems to hit him, and I have this sudden feeling that I just said something I shouldn't have. He takes a step towards Vincent and begins poking him on the chest so hard that I can even see his finger bend a little each time. So Vincent, would you mind explaining to me who Isaac is? Vincent slaps Sebastian's hand away and crosses his arms. Didn't you just hear he's the android in charge of the warehouse? What's the matter, Sebastian? You don't recognize your own employees? For F's sake, Vincent. Wait, it's Tuesday, innit? I can't do the British. How many times are we going to have this conversation? It's the second time this week. Christopher doesn't count. He was transferred here. That's not the point, and you know it. You're overreacting. Isaac has been here for almost a month already, and you didn't find out until now. I should say something before things get worse. What did he do? Bring his own personal sex bot from home and have it start doing his work for him in the warehouse? Seriously. Okay, I'll side with Vincent. The fact that Isaac was already here before us is pretty suspicious. But since I know nothing about the situation other than what I just heard, I'll have to trust Vincent's judgment and hope for the best. Mr. Griffin, please calm down. You have every right to be angry, but if he was up to something, I'm pretty sure you or Vincent would know by now. Besides, he's a good worker, and we could use one of those. I'm going to pretend that you didn't just tell me to calm down, Wells. But you do have a point. We could use some cheap, good help. If you're so sure that it'll make a good addition to the DOI, surely you won't have any issues answering for it. It takes me a moment to understand what he means, but as soon as I do, I make sure to keep a serious expression while I shake my head. You must be expecting me to back down, to not be willing to back Isaac with actual concrete actions. Not at all, Mr. Griffin. Very well, then it'll be your responsibility. Now, all this has given me a terrible headache, so I'm going to my office, and I don't want any of you to bother me, unless Satan himself comes through the front door, demanding service. Sebastian walks past Vincent and Isaac, all but pushing them away while muttering something about people that make his job harder. As soon as he's gone, Vincent gives me a playful nudge with his elbow. Look at you, darling. Vincent? He doesn't say anything more, but he does wink at me as he drags his thumb and index finger across his mouth in a zipping gesture. I also appreciate it, Christopher. The trust you and Vincent have shown me is more than I could have asked for. Just try not to give Mr. Griffin a reason to fire us both, alright? Let's get back to work. Ah, what is this? What? Interesting. I guess they have a little... What do you call those? I forget what you call them, but you know, between scene things. Interesting. It was cute, I guess. The next day, the first thing that Sebastian does when I arrive is show me my office. Actually, calling it an office would be too kind. It's not even a cubicle, really. It's a fold table put in a corner of one of the halls, along with a spare chair and a very old computer on top of it. There's also a phone that looks so old that I can't believe it has buttons instead of a dial. The whole setup looks very feeble, like it'll collapse if I sit on it wrong. I can't think of a better way to make it clear that as it stands now, my employment here is only temporary. Transition? Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. I guess I'm stupid. Sebastian pulls back the chair and then gestures at it. You'll work here. Every afternoon, I put your schedule up in the break room. Anything that requires immediate attention takes precedence. Otherwise, just follow whatever it says. And if you see Vincent slacking off, make sure he goes back to doing whatever he's supposed to be doing. He usually takes care of the front desk, so that means that ideally you shouldn't see him at all. I've left about a quarter of your schedule empty since you'll be working on your proposal. A not so subtle warning to not eat into the time meant for other activities with it. I sit down as carefully as I can, Still not entirely convinced that the chair can actually support my weight. The loud squeaking noise it lets out doesn't make me feel any more confident about it, but at least it doesn't break right away. The computer works roughly the same way as the one in my office, which you already know how to use. Sebastian reaches out behind the table, pressing a button to turn the computer on. The screen takes about a minute to show any sign of being in working condition, but once it does, it finishes booting up without any further issues. For now, just keep on working on whatever forms come in, then start up with the census if you have time left. I'll call you if anything comes up. Do you have any questions? I briefly consider voicing my concerns, but in the end I decide against it. It's not like Sebastian will change anything just because I say so, and if I push him too much, he might just end up making me sit on the floor or something. I shake my head and apparently, pleased with my silence, Sebastian nods before turning around and leaving. As soon as he's gone, I get to work. I know he told me to start with the forms, but since I still need to go over the census, I'll do that instead. The forms shouldn't take more than a few minutes each, so I can get them done before the end of my shift. And frankly, the forms being so boring would only add to the depressing atmosphere of this place. Assuming that there's at least one digital copy of the report, I begin to look for the file on the computer. The computer's slow and takes forever to connect to the main server. And though it doesn't bother me at first, it soon starts to get on my nerves. Especially when it becomes obvious that the file I need is not here. I pick up the phone with the intention of calling Sebastian, and I'm surprised to hear Vincent's voice before I even have the chance to dial a number. Yes. Vincent? Chris, you've got a phone now? No wonder I didn't recognize the extension. I actually meant to call Mr. Griffin. Do you know how I can change who receives the call? I'm not sure about your phone, but the others just connect to the front desk. Then I transfer them. It's how we keep the line from saturating. I'm stupid, or what's our work again? We work at the Department of Integration. So we help monsters integrate into society? I don't know. What do you need Sebastian for anyway? Wasn't he with you just now? Yes, but I need some documents from the last census, and I'm not sure whether we don't have them or if it's just a computer that's not working. Probably a little bit of both. Give me a second, I'll be right over there. Vincent either forgets he's supposed to transfer me or outright decides he doesn't feel like it and hangs up. Well, who needs him to? Can't he just come over? I almost jump out of my chair as the door that leads to the hall opens without warning, stopping mere inches away from hitting the table. When I realize it isn't actually going to hit it and topple everything on the top, I let out a sigh of relief. Good afternoon, Vincent. Can we stop being so catty and rolling our eyes? Hello, love. So, this is where he puts you. What is this thing? He stops right next to me, reaching out with a hand and slightly pushing down the table so that it wobbles back and forth. I put my hands on top of the monitors to stop the computer from falling down, and once it stops moving, I get Vincent to take a step back with a wave. My desk. Yeah, no, you'll ruin your back in this thing. You'll ruin your everything in this thing. How about this? We'll wait for the lunch break and we'll switch the chair for the one in one of the break rooms. There's not much we can do about the computer, but we can at least get you an actual desk from the warehouse. Won't Mr. Griffin notice if we start changing the furniture around? This part of the building is so deserted that not even Sebastian comes here often. No offense, but there's a reason you're here. By the time he stops by, he won't even care anymore. He'll assume I had something to do with it, shout at me for a bit like he always does, then forget about it. Yeah, let's change it. The truth is that I wouldn't mind having a different chair. At the very least, I can't do my work properly if I spend half my time trying to find a position that doesn't make me uncomfortable. Besides, if the desk ends up falling down and the computer breaks because of it, I'm sure Sebastian would be infinitely angrier. Alright, Vincent, let's do it. Perfect, I'll text Ben. Vincent takes out his phone and begins to type. By the time I realize what he's doing, he's already done it and putting it back in his pocket. Ben? Of course, Son has to keep watch while the others move the stuff. It was either him or Isaac, and I'm not entirely sure that Isaac wouldn't end up telling Sebastian even by accident. If you had told me, so I don't get, does Ben not have a job? Can he just come to here in the middle of the monster working day? He's a werewolf, so maybe, I don't know. Maybe this is off work hours for him. You wouldn't have agreed, which is why I didn't tell you. It's too late now anyway. I already sent the message. He says it'll be here before the lunch break starts. Sebastian usually eats at a place down the street, and Isaac uses the break to recharge, which gives us about 20 minutes to get everything ready before he comes back. Watch monsters be the dominant species, and our job is to help integrate humans into monster society? Maybe. I take my hands... They already said that monsters are more... There are more monsters in this city than humans, is what they said, so... I take my hand off the computer and lean forward so that my arms are resting on the desk. I should have figured he'd do something like this. It sounded way too easy to be true. Well then, I'll leave you to your work. See you later. While Vincent leaves, I let out a sigh of resignation and turn my attention back to the computer. As the hours pass, I realize what Vincent had meant about being in a secluded area of the building. Even if I'm technically right beside the break room, the fact that there's a door between this hall and the next means that I'm effectively out of sight and out of mind. If it wasn't for the time I took to go check the schedule, and for Vincent having stopped by earlier, I think I could have gone the whole shift without seeing so much as a single soul. The upside is that there's no one to interrupt me, so I'm pretty much done with my work by the time lunch break rolls around. I hear someone knock, and when I look up from the computer screen, I see that it's Ben and Vincent standing on the other side of the door. They come inside a moment later, and the first thing Ben does is pull me into a hug. This is sexual harassment. At least this time, he seems to remember to mind his strength. Instead of surrounding me with his arms and pulling me closer until I can't breathe like I thought he would, Ben stops when I'm barely pressed against him. Does this mean you'll be staying? Maybe. It means I've got the job for now. Since he has a little more tact than Vincent, Ben doesn't comment right away on the state of my makeshift cubicle, but I notice that he can't stop looking at it, his stare going back and forth between me and the chair and the table. Ben, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Vincent would call you when he offered to help. He waves his hand dismissively in a dismissive gesture, then smiles. It's not the first time Vincent has done it, and it won't be the last. Besides, what are friends for? Vincent squeezes himself between Ben and me, putting an arm on my shoulder and the other around Ben's waist, pulling the three of us closer. Ben pushes him away gently, more amused than bothered. Alright, who's moving everything and who's keeping watch? I decide to keep watch while Ben and Vincent help Ben move it. I'll keep watch. You two are stronger than me. It'll be faster if you take care of moving everything. I'll stay here in case Sebastian comes back. They better, they're a vampire and a werewolf. Don't they have superhuman strength? I'm not too fond of the idea of having to explain this to Sebastian if we get caught. Still, I'm pretty sure it won't go any better if Vincent's the one who ends up having to do it instead. Besides, the faster we can get out of here and put the desk in its place, the sooner we'll be finished. When Vincent offers to help, he's really offering for someone else to help? Hell yeah. I unplug the computer as carefully as I can, then move it and the rest of the things onto the floor so that they have no problem lifting the table and folding it. Since Ben can carry the table by himself without too much trouble, Vincent picks up the chair, then goes ahead and keeps the door open for him. I'm not entirely sure of how much time passes, but it's not more than a couple of minutes before the door swings open. And that was fast. But instead of Vincent and Ben, it's Sebastian. I panic briefly when thinking of an excuse, and there's this moment of awkward silence as we both stare at each other. I mean, isn't this desk cruel and unusual punishment? It's Tuesday, innit? Well, you're here. He looks just about as surprised to see me as I am to see him, and since he doesn't seem to have noticed the table is missing, I decide to use the opportunity to catch him off guard. I quickly grab a bunch of papers and then take a couple of steps towards the opposite side of the hall. And note that Sebastian quite can't follow me with his eyes and has to turn slightly. I can't get him to turn his back to the now empty space, but this way he's not directly facing it either. I wasn't feeling hungry, so I stayed behind to get some work done. When it seems like Sebastian's about to look away, I push the papers in front of him and point at the end of the first page. Take it up with monster resources. Actually, I'm glad you're here. I'm pretty sure all of these are done, but they still need your signature. Can you take a look? Fine, but not here. As I follow Sebastian to his office, I get to see Vincent and Ben about to come out of the break room out of the corner of my eye. They manage to turn around at the last possible moment, and while it makes Sebastian do a double take, he doesn't actually stop to check. Unfortunately, the distraction works a little too well. What should have just been enough time for Vincent and Ben to finish switching the furniture ends up turning into an entire remaining lunch break, and the next 2 hours as well. Why? What? At one point, I seriously begin to suspect that Sebastian did notice the missing table, and is just doing this to mess with me, but he makes absolutely no comment about it. Not even to bring up how dumb we were for trying to fool him, or how we clearly have way too much free time if we can waste on these sorts of things. Instead, he just sends me on my way when we're done. Ben is long gone by the time I go back to the hall, of course, but Vincent is there waiting for me. He's sitting on the chair they brought in, swinging it back and forth and then trying to balance it on its rear legs. At least now I know that it won't break for me just sitting on it. Jesus, 2 hours signing papers? Yeah, I didn't quite understand that. I don't understand how they spent 2 hours doing that. You know, Vincent, this felt like a lot like I was the one doing you a favor. I'm sorry, I swear it usually takes much longer. Since he has the decency to look apologetic, I'm not angry with him as I thought I would be. It probably helps that I had those extra 2 hours to calm down too. Hey Kuro, what's up? Hey gamer, what's up with you? I also hope you apologize to Ben. That's the first thing I did, and he said he didn't mind because we didn't get caught. He was more worried about you. Sebastian didn't say anything about it, so I'm assuming he didn't notice. Actually, he seemed pretty distracted. The forms we went over weren't even that important, and they could have been just fine without a signature. Who knows? He's weird like that. So how about the desk and chair? A lot better than what you had, aren't they? They sure are. Thank you, Vincent. I wouldn't be calm after spending 2 hours doing paperwork. You're welcome. And now I should get back to work before Sebastian decides to stop by and ask what I did all day. See you later, love. Despite what Vincent said about not doing anything, when I sit down I find that all my things are not only already on the desk, but that all the paperwork is arranged in the order it's supposed to be turned in. Oops. Even the folders are properly labeled. As I begin putting the papers inside the folders, I can't help but smile. After being here for a little over 2 weeks, I think I can finally say that I've settled into the pace of things. We've been in this hallway for 2 weeks? Oh god. This is human discrimination, isn't it? Don't we have a good lawsuit right now? I feel like we should. Most of the time, work is slow as we take care of the daily activities. On occasion, it's followed by periods of intense crunch time as either something urgent comes up, or Sebastian decides that the best way to alleviate the stress of running the place is to make us all feel as pressured. Vincent did work, it's a miracle. You think he didn't have Ben do it before he left? Rinse and repeat. I'm now also more or less convinced that the people of St. George don't actually dislike me. Probably because the more they see me around, the less I seem like the face of an otherwise abstract human authority. But instead of making my job easier, I now feel more pressure than ever to deliver a good proposal to Sebastian and stay here. I take a look at the paper with today's schedule sitting in front of me. Copied from the one in the break room, and I'm surprised to find it pretty much empty. There are 1 or 2 things that shouldn't take too long, but overall I'll have plenty of free time to work on the census. Just sleeping in the hallway for 2 weeks. Sleeping? We didn't sleep in here, we did our work in here. My good mood is ruined as soon as I take out the files that Sebastian got me from the drawer, and I remove the sticky note on top. Whatever was wrong with the computer that day was apparently more serious than any of us realized, because it wasn't long before the whole thing became unusable as anything besides a word processor. While the additional effort doesn't bother me more than all the other things in the office that need fixing, Sebastian has taken to expressing his displeasure in the form of passive-aggressive notes. Yep, horribly malnourished because nobody fed us. At least the old census was organized relatively well, all things considered, so I don't have any problems finding what I need. In fact, using its results, I'm able to get pretty much all the questions meant to gather general information out of the way in one sitting. Now I can get the real work started, which is the part about the quality of life in St. George and what the Department of Integration can do to improve it. I got some idea of what I want to include based on what I knew before coming here and what I've seen since. But since I'm also interested in the relationship of the office with the people here, I need to make sure to find a way to include those questions in there too. There must be a reason why everyone has such a poor image of the office after all. Huh. But that's not the sort of thing that's reflected in pure hard data. I might need a different approach to this. That's it! Why couldn't they just toss us an apple? Why didn't I think of it before? I know 4 people whose opinions should be able to point me in the right direction. I can ask Vincent. I think I'm going to choose any other option. Vincent gives me the impression of being someone with lots of connections, and according to himself, he's pretty familiar with the lesser-known aspects of the town. Maybe he can offer me some insight into the relationship of the office with the rest of St. George. I pick up the phone, and just like last time, Vincent answers right away. Hey, Chris. Hey, Vincent, do you have any plans for lunch? Not yet. Do you mind if I join you? I've got some questions, and I could use your help. Love, if you're trying to gather the courage to ask whether I'm still up for dating, you know the answer is yes. Since it's not like Vincent can tell over the phone, I don't even attempt to resist the urge to roll my eyes. You caught me, that's totally what I was thinking. It's what I was thinking! Why must you be allergic to the D? What can I say? They all fall to my charms eventually. Crap, Sebastian's coming this way. See you at lunch. Right before Vincent hangs up, I can see Sebastian's voice telling him to quit wasting time. Since he's probably going to come back and check on me next, I turn my attention back to the computer and start with the paperwork. Well, if Sebastian doesn't actually show up, the idea is more than enough to keep me focused for the rest of the evening. I assume it's the same for Vincent, since I don't so much as hear from him after the call. As soon as it's time for break, I head outside. About 15 minutes pass without any sign of Vincent, and even if he did get held back by Sebastian, I can't help but feel irritated at the fact that he couldn't take the time to let me know that he'd be too busy for lunch. Just as I'm about to leave to go eat on my own, Vincent finally comes out of the building. Before I can say anything to him, he heads straight towards me and grabs me by the arm. We've already lost too much time. Talk while you walk, love. You said you had some questions for me? Yeah, I wanted to know a little bit more about St. George before getting to work on the census. Vincent looks at me with a confused expression. At first, I think that he's just messing with me like he tends to do, but when his expression doesn't change, I realize that he really doesn't have any idea what I'm talking about. The census, you know, the thing that Mr. Griffin asked me to do so Isaac and I could stay? That's right, I was hoping he had forgotten. Anyway, what do you need my help for? Isn't it just a bunch of questions? They don't even change that much from census to census, do they? That's just for the population and housing. An important part of the census is knowing what other questions to ask and how to ask them. I have an idea of where to start, but I'd like to go beyond what the mayor's office is expecting to see in our report. You've come to the right person then. If something or someone is worth knowing, I do. And if I don't, it wasn't worth knowing in the first place. Ask away, dear. Let's start with your experience working at the DOI and go from there. One of the issues of the office is that, relatively speaking, we don't get much work. With a population made up almost exclusively of monsters. You're stupid? What's a census? Girl, look it up. We should really need more than 4 full-time employees to get things done every day. It would be great to be able to make some kind of... It would be great to offer some kind of explanation, even if it just turns out to be animosity. You're a vampire, Vincent. Do you think having a job at the DOI has impacted your life? Your relationship with other monsters? I don't think people treat me any differently. Not to my face, at least. Really? You say it like it's a bad thing. I mean, that's great, but it's not the impression I had. They know it's just a job. At most, I get people asking me to put them on the top of the day's list because they don't want to wait for hours until Sebastian feels like talking to them. Has something been bothering you? Not to my face. Alright, I get it. I'm not trying to avoid your question. Chris, I promise I haven't noticed anything like that. It's not that I don't believe him, it's just that sometimes it's hard to tell whether he's being, facetious? That's how you say it, right? Or is it factitious? It's factitious. No, it's... God, I'm stupid. I'm well past the point of having learned to deal with it as part of his personality, but that doesn't make it any less annoying when trying to have a serious conversation. By the way, how long have you been working for the DOI? I started a little after I moved here. That makes 5 years, give or take. That's longer than me. I would have never guessed. Where did you live before? Here and there, a little bit of everywhere. I never really could get rid of the Wallachian accent completely, though. Not that I try that hard nowadays. Turns out that a lot of people are really into it. Did you just say Wallachia? As in the vampire country? Vincent makes a clicking sound with his tongue as he looks away. He seems slightly uncomfortable all of a sudden, as if he had just realized that he brought it up and was now hoping me to ignore that part between everything else he said. Yeah. Now that he mentions it, he does have a rather particular way of pronouncing certain letters, but I never would have imagined that was the reason. I know, I'm supposed to be asking... I know I'm supposed to be asking about the census, and that if I change the subject, I'm gonna have a really hard time getting us back on track, but... Hearing stories from vampires who actually lived in Wallachia always turns out to be really interesting. And to be completely honest, the way he's acting right now makes me more curious about it. I... ask him about his time in Wallachia? Is he gonna be angry at me? I think Vincent can handle being the one who feels uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation for once. What's Wallachia like, Vincent? Dead and boring. You can't just say that and not explain. Let me put it this way. It's exhausting. There are rules for everything, and your opinion on most things doesn't actually matter until you're either old or important enough. And guess what? There's always someone older and more important. Sebastian may be a pain in the ass, but at the end of the day, he's just my boss. I could walk away anytime I really felt like it. So you think you can, but you can't. Capitalism has that stranglehold on you. As soon as you walk away, how are you going to make rent? As a vampire, I don't have that luxury with Wallachia. No matter what, all the things I don't like about the place are going to follow me forever because of the principle of extraterritoriality. If that's how you feel, why even live there in the first place? It's complicated. Basically, all my clan did, and I was young back then. And no, you don't get to ask me about my age, love. If I tell you, you're going to think of it in mortal terms and act all weird about it. I wasn't going to ask you about your age, Vincent. Maybe not now, but the more we talk about things I've done and places I've been to, the more you're going to want to do the math. And you're going to end up making me feel ancient. All you need to know is that if I were human, I wouldn't be much older than you. Anyway, here we are. We can keep talking after we order. The place we stop at is basically a small bar, which looks rather seedy when compared to the almost suburban look of the rest of the town. It actually suits Vincent rather well. He steps in front of me, holding the door up. Do you really have to pay rent when you can take a nap for 1,000 years? Maybe not, maybe not. I guess he can just get in a coffin and go take a rest, right? Damn, I want to be a vampire. I want to be free from rent. He steps in front of me, holding the door open by leaning against it. But just when I'm about to go inside, Vincent lets go and it slams close centimeters away from my face. What? Is he pranking me? It's just a prank, bro. What the hell, Vincent? On second thought, let's go somewhere else. What? Why? We're already here. I lean to the side, trying to catch a glimpse of the inside of the bar. But the way Vincent is standing and the closed door effectively both mean that I can't see anything. I just remembered that they mixed up my order last time and gave me diet blood. Talk about disgusting. You wouldn't believe how gross that tastes. I cross my arms and sigh. I'm annoyed by how he made me walk all the way here just to change his mind at the last possible moment. But not enough to argue with him over it. Did he see his ex in there? There is a much better place down the street. If we hurry, we can still eat there. By the time we get to the other, much nicer looking restaurant, the break is almost over. We don't really have time left to eat, let alone keep discussing the census, so I am left to work with what I already have. This is it. Today's the day I'm supposed to present my census proposal to Sebastian so he can go over it, and either approve it or reject it. Still gotta rent out the space for the coffin. Capitalism comes for us all. Oh my god. If he turns down the proposal, then neither Isaac nor I will continue working here. The more I think about it, the less I think the proposal is actually ready. When I finally decide to get out of bed, I can barely do it, and not even a shower or eating breakfast manages to wake me up completely. After getting dressed, I practically crawl to the living room and wait for Vincent, letting myself drop on top of the couch and throwing my head back against the backrest. Luckily, before I have the chance to start worrying myself to death, I'm interrupted by the sound of Vincent's door opening. Good afternoon, love. Are you ready? I give him a half-hearted shrug. I suppose. I must look worse than I thought because he sits down next to me, putting a hand on my back using the little space available and gently pulling me closer. I glare at him, but I don't bother telling him to remove it. What's with the attitude? Today's the big day. You can't go looking so gloomy to work. I put my hands over my face in a gesture of defeat. That's exactly the problem. What if Mr. Griffin hates it? I can't afford to screw up, Vincent. Sebastian may be a jerk with a stick up his bum, but he's not an idiot. You're really good at your job. He'll see that. I bet he already does. He treats you better than he treats me. I'm kind of worried that he'll fire me to make space in the budget for you. His tone goes from serious to playful, obviously trying to lighten up the mood. It doesn't do much for my nervousness, but the attempt brings a small smile to my face. If that happens, I promise I'll let you stay with me. See what you do to me? Now I'm starting to wish that he'd fire me for real. Vincent grins, pushing me forward just enough so that he can pat my back, leaving me breathless for a moment as he stands up. He walks towards the door and holds it open for me. Thanks, Vincent. I needed that. Oh, you can thank me properly when we get back. And there's the Vincent I know. I pretend not to hear him as we both leave the house. When we get to the DOI, Sebastian and Isaac are already waiting for us. It's not the first time that I've seen Sebastian wait for someone at the door, but given the situation, the fact that I'm in the receiving end myself, there's something suddenly really menacing about it. I wave at Isaac and he waves back. It's Tuesday, innit? You're here on time, both of you. It's a good start, I suppose. Come inside so we can get this over with. Vincent looks at me and I can practically see him bite his tongue to avoid saying something to Sebastian. Fortunately, he resists the urge just fine and we manage to avoid having an unnecessary argument about it. Vincent and Isaac go with Sebastian straight to his office, while I make a brief stop at the space that passes as my cubicle to go over everything one last time, and make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. As soon as I'm done, I head to the office as quickly as I can. The place looks really small with the four of us standing here. Even after Sebastian moves behind the desk and sits down, we barely fit in the room. Since there aren't enough seats for the other three of us, we decide to remain standing up instead. Well, where is it? Sebastian extends an arm towards me, and I give him the binder. Apparently I'm too slow for his liking, because he closes his hands around the binder and pulls it towards him. He begins to flip through the contents in silence, completely focused on them. I exchange a couple of looks with Vincent and Isaac, but neither of them seems to have any idea of what he could be thinking either. As soon as he's finished, Sebastian starts over again. And again. It's an acceptable job, but... Sebastian snaps the binder shut and puts it down on the desk before sliding it to the opposite side so that it's closer to us than him. I hesitate for a moment before picking it up. Frankly, I expected quite a bit more. It's not your fault, Wells. When it comes down to it, not everyone is cut out for the job. For a moment, I'm so shocked that I don't even blink. Instead, I just stand in place, trying to get my brain to process what I just heard. He didn't like it. I don't get to stay, and neither does Isaac. I let out a breath. I didn't even know I was holding a nod. I understand, Mr. Griffin. Thank you for the opportunity either way. Vincent looks at me and then at Sebastian. At first he seems just as surprised as I am, but then his expression changes into a frown. Before I can stop him, he takes the binder from my hands and throws it at Sebastian. Sebastian winces when the folder hits him, but he barely moves from his place. It's a subtle but definitive demonstration of authority, and it tells me that he's not going to humor Vincent this time. You're full of crap and you know it. You said that if you prepared the census, he and Isaac would get to stay. Don't interrupt me, Vincent, or I'll be firing your booty in addition to not hiring them. What I said was that they'd get to stay if Wells did a good enough job, which he didn't. It's simply not worth the trouble, especially if I take the robot into consideration. Have him correct it then. I don't have time to go over the proposal all over again. Every single time, it's Tuesday in it, every single time I send it back for corrections, and for all I know, he might never get it right. You're dismissed. Go home, all of you. Vincent, let's go. Vincent pretends not to hear me as he begins to walk around the desk and towards Sebastian. When I put a hand on his arm to stop him, the first thing he does is shove it away. Vincent, please. He rolls his eyes and lets out a frustrated sigh, but he stops. Hi, Kuro. Hi, chat. Just got up and turned on to watch. Is this game any good? I love the art style. Well, we're getting into it. We'll find out. Just to make sure that there isn't any trouble, I let Isaac and him go before walking out of the room. Huh. Unfortunately for you, Brill-chan, Mr. that just got up, this is where I'm going to be ending today's stream. But, you know, thank you all for watching.